Hello there and Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the My English Matters podcast. I'm Amnah, and in today's episode, I'll be talking about something that I believe all of us have faced at some point in our lives: nervousness. More specifically, what to do when you're nervous when speaking English. Now, before we dive in, let me give you a little behind the scenes look at preparing for this podcast. To be honest, I wasn't sure how to tackle this episode at first. I had two main ideas based on recent questions from our students. One of the questions was, how do I overcome nervousness? And this is something many of our students ask. They get really nervous about speaking English, especially in front of others who they believe to be more fluent than they are. And it's totally understandable. So, speaking in a second language can feel like you're under a spotlight, and that pressure can make you freeze up. And the other question was a question that a student personally asked me. She asked, how did you, Madam Amna, become fluent and confident in English? Can you share your story? And so I initially thought about covering these two questions in two separate episodes. But then I realized that combining them into one episode probably would make it more engaging, insightful, and hopefully more helpful. So I hope you can relate to these stories and the lessons that I've learned from them. In this episode, I'll share how my journey with nervousness is connected to my path to becoming fluent and confident in English. I'll offer personal stories of how I faced and managed nervousness over the years and how I've learned to turn it into a strength. If you've ever felt nervous about speaking English, whether it's for a presentation, a meeting, or just chatting with someone new, you are not alone. Trust me, we've all been there. So, I'll be sharing tips on how you can handle that nervous energy and use it to become a better speaker. All right, let me tell you a bit about my journey. Let's go back to when I was 6 years old. So, my family had just moved to Manchester, England, and I found myself in a school where everyone spoke a language I did not speak. Can you guess what it was? English, of course. So I hadn't attended kindergarten back in Malaysia. So my first day at Cheetham Community School, Manchester, was my very first day of school in my short 6 years of life. I didn't know any English. I had never been spoken to in English, nor had I ever spoken English with anyone before, at least not that I could recall. So for the first few months of school, I didn't speak at all. Can you imagine that? I spent around 7 hours a day at that school without saying a peep. I did have friends, but for the most part, I kept to myself, listening to everyone around me. Now, looking back, I realized that even though I wasn't speaking, I was learning. I was absorbing the language like a sponge, building my confidence bit by bit. And so, to cut a long story short, I eventually did start speaking. It wasn't something I consciously decided to do, but after a few months of just listening, it happened naturally. And I remember one day I was playing by myself in the playground at school, talking out loud in English, and a friend overheard me. She was surprised to hear me speak because I hadn't spoken at all until that point. So back in the classroom, I remember her telling all my classmates, Amna can speak now. And me, being someone who hates attention, I just replied nonchalantly, yeah, so what? And this brings me to my first tip. Allow yourself to absorb the language like a sponge. Even when you feel like you're not participating, listening and observing can help you build a foundation. Your mind is taking in patterns, vocabulary, and sounds. So when the time comes, it will flow more naturally than you think. And while it's important to push yourself to speak, just know that listening is also part of the process. All right, fast forward to when I was 14 years old. After about 8 years in the UK, my family moved back to Malaysia. Now, this time, the tables were turned. I could speak English fluently, but I struggled with Malay. And I felt like I was starting all over again. But I didn't let that stop me. I was determined to catch up. I went out and bought books for Standard One. Yes, the books that 7-year-olds were using. And I would ask my mum about every single word I did not know. It was hard work, but it taught me another lesson. When you are nervous about not knowing something, be proactive in learning it. And the nerves I felt from not being able to speak Malay at school didn't hold me back. In fact, they motivated me to take action. I was determined to catch up, so I wasn't discouraged or embarrassed about going back to basics. Well, nobody really knew that I was a teenager doing Standard One workbooks anyway, at least not until now. So, if you're nervous about not being good enough in English, let that nervous energy fuel your growth. Don't see it as a weakness. It's just a sign that you care and you want to get better. Use it to push yourself, to ask questions, read more, and practice every day. Don't shy away from revisiting the basics. It's not about how fast you progress, but how determined you are to keep going no matter where you're starting from. Now, let me share a story from when I was in Form 5. So I was around 17. This is a story of both success and failure. I joined an elocution contest for schools in Kuala Lumpur. An elocution contest is a competition where participants are judged on their ability to deliver spoken performances with clarity, expression, and effectiveness. So we, as the participants, had to memorize a script that we wrote for ourselves, and we had 2 weeks to prepare. After about 2 weeks of training, it was showtime. And as I stepped on stage at that school, I was really nervous. I did feel some confidence because I had trained, but my knees were literally shaking uncontrollably. And I could feel my heart racing as I gave my speech. But because I had trained and rehearsed extensively with my English teacher and even with my own sister, Azima, I managed to go through to the finals and eventually win that contest. So the support and guidance I got from my training were crucial in building my confidence. So the nerves never completely went away, but I learned that with the right training, guidance, and thorough preparation, it's possible to manage and even overcome them. The more you practice, the more confident you become. But here's where the story takes a turn. So later that same year, I was entered into another public speaking contest. And this time, however, I didn't perform as well. You may be wondering why. So initially, I had confidence in memorizing scripts and speaking prepared content. However, I struggled with impromptu speaking. I could hold a conversation in English, but speaking for 6 minutes straight without any preparation seemed daunting. I had convinced myself that I wasn't good at speaking off the cuff, and this belief became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So during the contest, we were given a topic through a random draw and had just 2 minutes to prepare. Now, unfortunately, during those 2 minutes that I was supposed to prepare, I barely even tried because I was paralyzed by that limiting belief that I could not do it. So, to put it simply, I had already failed before even trying. And as I stepped onto that stage after my 2 minutes were up, all eyes were on me, my mind went blank, and I just struggled to deliver. It was truly awkward. But this experience taught me a valuable lesson. Your mindset can significantly impact how you handle nervousness. At that time, being 17 years old, I believed that I wasn't naturally good at impromptu speaking and that it was a skill beyond my reach. And this mindset it just fueled my anxiety and it held me back. Now, over the years, I've learned to shift my perspective to a learning mindset. I've learned that being able to speak English in impromptu situations is actually a skill, one that can be developed. Although I didn't have that skill at the time when I was 17, I eventually realized that I could learn it. And back then, I believed I could never be good at impromptu speaking because it didn't come naturally to me. I believe that impromptu speaking skills were something that was natural to people and that I just didn't have that natural talent or skill. And I even often told myself that I was more of a writer than a speaker. So if you've been following my English Matters for a while, you may have heard me say that yourself. I always say that I'm more of a writer than a speaker. But the truth is, I honed my writing skills through a lot of practice and study. And the same should be able to be applied for impromptu speaking. So it wasn't something that came naturally, but over the years, through learning and practice, I became more comfortable with impromptu speaking. I still get nervous at times, but from having a certain level of competence, the nervousness is something that doesn't hold me back now. So it can be the same for you too. Instead of seeing nervousness as a barrier to your success, view it as an opportunity for growth. Embrace the challenge and remind yourself with affirmations like, I can grow from this mindset, or nervousness is my chance to improve. By adopting this learning mindset, you can transform. By adopting this learning mindset, you can transform nervousness into motivation. Now remember, it's not about being naturally perfect. It's about being open to learning and progressing. Let your nerves push you to perform better and believe in your ability to improve. All right, let's fast forward to my years in university. During this time, I was frequently chosen to MC events due to my fluency in English. At first, I found these opportunities both exciting and rewarding. However, as time went on, I began to feel less enthusiastic about them. So you'd think that by this point, I'd be comfortable speaking in front of an audience. But the truth is, I didn't like the feeling of being nervous. And one day, I vowed to myself that I would never MC again because I just hated feeling nervous and I just didn't want to go through that feeling anymore. And I also felt that feeling nervous meant I wasn't cut out for being an MC. And I felt that nerves were a bad thing. But guess what? I was wrong. Now, as I've grown both personally and as a teacher at My English Matters, I've learned that a certain amount of nervousness can actually be a good thing. So there's a balance to strike. Too much nervousness can paralyze you, making it hard to think clearly or to perform well, but a healthy dose of nerves, that can push you into action. It's the kind of nervousness that sharpens your focus, keeps you alert, and reminds you to take your preparation seriously. So, in my experience, it pushes me to prepare, to rehearse, and give my best effort. Even after doing so many live sessions online, on Facebook, YouTube, you name it, I still feel nervous before each one. And that's not a bad thing. It's a reminder that I care about delivering my best and connecting with my audience. I've also learned that there's no such thing as a quote unquote perfect performance, especially when you're live. And what matters is showing up, doing your best, and learning from each experience. So instead of judging yourself harshly after each situation where you felt that your nerves got the best of you, give yourself constructive feedback. Use those nerves as fuel, turning that nervous energy into something positive. Let it motivate you to improve, not hold you back. By embracing nervousness as a natural part of growth, you can continue to refine your skills and gain confidence. It's not about being perfect, but about being willing to learn and grow. Let your nerves drive you to better performance and see them as a sign that you are pushing your boundaries. All right, so based on what you've learned from listening to these stories, let's recap with my top 4 tips. Number 1, embrace the nerves. Nervousness isn't a bad thing. It shows that you care about what you're doing. And instead of trying to make the nerves go away, use them to motivate you to prepare and give it your best. Number 2, prepare and practice. The more you practice, the more confident you will become. Rehearse as much as you can, whether it's for a presentation, a meeting, or just speaking in English. Preparation helps reduce anxiety and makes you feel more in control. Tip number 3, change your mindset. Don't tell yourself that you can't do it. Your mindset plays a big role in how well you perform. Believe that you can do it or that you can learn to do it. Remember the learning mindset? Let that belief guide your actions and boost your confidence. Tip number 4, use positive affirmations. Remind yourself with positive affirmations like, I am prepared, I can handle this, and I have the skills to succeed. These affirmations help counteract negative thoughts and reinforce your confidence. So, before we end this episode, just remember nervousness is a natural part of speaking. Whether you're speaking in English or any other language, it doesn't have to be a roadblock. Embracing those nerves, preparing thoroughly, and believing in your abilities can transform that nervous energy into a powerful asset that propels you towards success. And as we've explored today, my own journey with nervousness has shown me that it's possible to turn anxiety into a source of motivation and growth. By applying these insights and strategies, you can approach your own speaking challenges with confidence and resilience. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the My English Matters podcast. I hope my experiences and tips inspire you to keep pushing forward even when faced with nerves. Remember, it's all part of the journey to improvement and success. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now and Assalamu alaikum.